The first round of the 2024 NBA playoffs are now done, half the field is eliminated, and there is a lot to take away from what we just saw on the court that round. This is what every move, all of the effort, and all of the planning from these players and teams have been building up to, so in some cases their plans are progressing swimmingly, while for others it's not so much. Today we're going to be going over the 4 biggest winners and the 4 biggest losers of the first round, with the impact of all of them landing on these lists, going far beyond simply their production on the court, but also it takes into account the ramifications of these results. Before we start though, it turns out a good amount of you watching right now aren't even subscribed to the channel, so if you enjoy the content, consider hitting the subscribe button, as not only does it help out a ton, but I'd also very much appreciate it. Now with that being said, let's begin. We'll start this off with our first loser of the first round, which is James Harden of the Los Angeles Clippers. James Harden started the year off holding out, making an entire spectacle about his contract situation and how he didn't feel the 76ers were being fair towards him. For a third year in a row, he forced his team to trade him to a new home in his never-ending quest to find the spot that he can win a championship with, and in doing so, obviously made this a championship or bust year for him and the Clippers. He got exactly what he wanted going to the Clippers. They had more than enough talent on paper after bringing him in, and yet their journey ended in the first round against the Mavericks in a series where Luka Doncic didn't even necessarily play his best. Of course, it needs to be acknowledged that Kawhi Leonard was out for all but one game this series, and Harden played well individually for the first half of the series too, but as is the story many times before, he disappeared in the final 2 games of the series, shooting a combined 7 of 28 from the field, and 1 of 13 from 3 in those games, once again coming up short in the biggest moments. Now for the first winner of the first round of the playoffs, we have Jalen Brunson of the New York Knicks. All year long, Brunson faced some ridiculous narratives that were pushed about what he is as a player and what he can be by the national media. There was a point where they were going out of their way to say that he couldn't be the alpha on a team, that he's not good enough to be a number 1 option on a contender, and other stuff along those lines. How did he respond? Well, he finished the regular season strong, clinching the 2 seed for the Knicks squad without Julius Randle, and in the first round against Philadelphia, he completely leveled up the further the series went on. He admittedly started the series off poorly in the first 2 games, shooting the ball pretty bad, both outings, but his teammates picked up the slack and got 2 wins, and from there, Brunson took care of the rest. In the last 4 games of the series, Brunson averaged a ridiculous 42 points and 10 assists per game overall, and he finished the first round as the leading scorer in the entire playoffs thus far. They're now in the driver's seat to at least make it to the conference finals, and Brunson individually is proving that he is a superstar in this league. Next, back over to the losers column, we have the Phoenix Suns as a group. The Suns are probably the most obvious inclusion on this list of the biggest losers of the first round of the playoffs, because they are as all in as it gets and don't really have anywhere else to go now. They put this core together for the purpose of making a deep playoff run at the very least, and at best they were planning to take home the Larry O'Brien trophy, yet their journey ends with them being empty-handed as it gets after being swept by the Minnesota Timberwolves. The trio of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal that was so ridiculously hyped up throughout the entire offseason leading up to this season couldn't even get a single playoff win together. And now, all of the flaws with their roster they've built have been fully exposed. They have no money to spend in free agency anytime soon, they have no draft picks to use for the rest of this decade, and their best players are trending in the wrong direction, getting older in the process. To put it simply, it's as big of a disaster as it gets from a roster construction perspective, so they either have to hope that they can just figure it out next year, or they might have to blow it up. Now back over to the next winner of the first round, we have Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves built their success this season on the defensive end of the floor, which absolutely did translate to their series against Phoenix, but if they were going to be able to legitimately contend for a title, they were going to need Anthony Edwards to play at a superstar level, and that is exactly what we have seen from him so far. He's literally leveling up before our very eyes on the big stage, bringing the type of fire and passion that makes you love the game of basketball. He's a fearless attacker who comfortably scores from all three levels, and he was doing a little bit of everything that his team needed from him across the board. He averaged 31 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists per game in that series, while shooting 51% from the field and 44% from 3, which just left no room for criticism whatsoever, and is ready to take that leap into the top tier of guards, and no moment is too big for him. The next of the biggest losers of the first round this year now is Brandon Ingram of the New Orleans Pelicans. Brandon Ingram is a former All-Star who has maintained a similarly high level throughout his entire tenure in New Orleans. This year's Pelicans team looked incredibly tough to beat this season for stretches when everyone was healthy and Zion Williamson was at his best, but unfortunately Zion suffered an untimely injury in the play-in tournament, causing him to miss the entire series against Oklahoma City, which meant the Pelicans needed Brandon Ingram to step back into the #1 role and take charge. Ingram, however, did not do that. The Pelicans swiftly got swept, and Brandon Ingram looked as pedestrian as he ever has. He averaged just 14 points in the series, shooting a horrific 34% from the field. He never once crossed the 20-point mark in any of the games, and in the elimination Game 4, he scored just 8 points, shooting 2 for 14. Things got so bad for him that there are now reports coming out saying that the Pelicans are not looking to offer him a contract extension, so next year may be his last with New Orleans. Now back to the biggest winners of the first round. The next one up is the Boston Celtics. The Celtics entered this postseason as the favorites to come out of the East anyway, because of how far ahead of every other team in the conference they were across the board, but their path to the finals is now even easier than it has ever been at any point in this new Celtics era. Damian Lillard for half the series and Giannis Antetokounmpo for all of the series were out against Indiana, leading them to being eliminated, and all year long the Bucks were the ones viewed as the Celtics' biggest competition in the conference. The Knicks are very tough and will defend them hard as anybody, assuming that they do meet in the conference finals, but the Celtics have way more firepower than the 76ers do, and every game in that Knicks 76ers series was a battle that went down to the wire. It's a shame that injuries have hampered this year as much as they have, but it's working in the Celtics' favor right now for sure. Now we turn to the last of the biggest losers of the first round, with it being Damian Lillard of the Milwaukee Bucks. Of course, it needs to be stated that, as I just mentioned, the Bucks were struck hard by the injury bug at the worst time since Giannis Antetokounmpo was not able to suit up at all in the playoffs this year, and Dame himself missed 2 games in the series too. But this was supposed to be the year that Dame's career had a different outcome, and it just did not work out that way. He finally requested a trade away from the Trailblazers for the purpose of chasing a title, and Milwaukee represented that at the beginning. I'm not here to say Lillard individually failed by any means given the circumstances, and the fact that he played pretty well against Indiana when he was healthy helps that too, but he's still on this list today because his opportunities to accomplish that ultimate goal are dwindling. Lillard also looked like he was starting to regress individually this year overall, so the clock is really ticking on both him and Milwaukee as a whole with this current core. And finally, the last winner from the first round that we'll be discussing today is Donovan Mitchell of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Mitchell's found himself in a lot of trade rumors in recent weeks, with most of them coming with a warning about the fact that if the Cavaliers were to have flamed out quickly like they did last year, Mitchell's patience may have run thin, and he could bolt in the near future. This first round series was by no means easy at all, and there was a point where it looked like it would go the opposite direction, but the Cavaliers just closed out the Orlando Magic in a Game 7 win, and Mitchell himself has never looked better over a 2-game stretch. He combined for an absurd 89 points in the last 2 games of that series, putting the team on his back when no one else around him could really get anything going offensively, and now the Cavaliers can hopefully breathe a sigh of relief with their season still being alive. The team still has a lot to improve on moving forward, but Mitchell looks more locked in than ever in Cleveland. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below who you think the biggest winners and losers of the round are. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.